guys, it's Genevieve, and in this video we are going to learn how to draw a watercolor bamboo in Procreate, so on the iPad Pro. And I will be using the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, which includes a bunch of things such as Procreate brushes as well as a pre-textured watercolor file for Procreate. I will link it in the description below if you want to check it out, and I will also include a promo code just for you guys. But otherwise, you can still follow the tutorial along using your favorite brushes. You're just not going to get a final result that looked like it was painted with watercolors. Okay, let's jump in. So the first thing we are going to do is create a brand new layer and pick a nice bright green, as well as the Dark Edges watercolor brush if you do have the watercolor toolbox, set to the largest size. We are just going to draw some really quick, nice, and flowy vertical lines. Don't worry too much, you do want to have some sort of a texture and shapes, so you can go pretty quickly with that step. And then we are going to blend in the straight edges here, because we do want to have some color variation, just not as sharp as this. So go pick the watercolor wash brush, and really quickly, you can just go over what you just drew and blend it in. You're still going to maintain some of the texture, which is really important for watercolor, but it's just not going to look as intensely straight as it did before. Awesome. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the different little sections that are on the bamboo stalks. And to do that, we are going to use the selection tool here, set on freehand. And we're going to draw a couple circles here that we are then going to feather quite a lot, so somewhere between 30 and 40%. And from the adjustment panel here at the top, we are going to select Hue, Saturation, and Brightness. And we are going to lower the brightness as well as shift the hue towards the right, which is going to make it look a bit more blue. Awesome. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. If you feel adventurous, you can go ahead and draw 3 circles in this one. The only thing that really matters is that you really feather it quite a lot, so yeah, somewhere between 30 and 40%. And again, hue, saturation, brightness, you are going to lower the brightness and shift the hue towards the right. Great. So now we're starting to see the different sections that our bamboo stalks are going to have. But we are going to make these sections a bit more defined by erasing some horizontal lines. Go ahead and double tap on your eraser here, which is going to open the entire brush library. But instead of adding colors like it would with your brush tool, it's going to erase the color. Pick the color shifting brushes if you have the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox and set it to a fairly small or medium small size. And above the darker spots that we just created, we are going to erase slightly curved horizontal lines. So by now, the main shape of your bamboo is pretty much established. So what we're going to do now basically is we're just going to add more depth to the piece, and we're also going to add some leaves so we have a bit more movement. So first thing first, we're going to go back to the selection tool here, and we're going to select one of the sides of the bamboo, feather the selection somewhere between 40 and 50%, and going back to the Hue, Saturation, Brightness panel, we're going to lower the brightness so we get some really nice shadows. Let's do it again on the other side, or the other stalk, I should say. Feather quite a lot, and Hue, Saturation, Brightness, lower the brightness. You can lower the saturation a little bit too. And see, now we have some light effect within the piece. We are also going to add a little bit of color variation that is just random to mimic what you would get with real watercolor. You would get the pigments blending together. So with your selection tool again, this time just draw a really funky squiggly shape. and feather it somewhere between 20 and 30%. You guessed it, hue, saturation, brightness. Just shift the hue towards blue a little bit. You can play with the saturation too. And maybe the brightness, but I think I would avoid it for this step and really stick with hue and saturation. Cool, so now you see you have some blue that is mixed in it with the green, and it looks really cool. Okay, let's go ahead and create a brand new layer. And with the same green, with the thin and thinnest watercolor, we are going to start drawing the leaves. So go ahead and just kind of really quickly plan where you want your leaves to be. So just by drawing like the general directions. And then really quickly go ahead and draw your leaves. Bamboo leaves tend to be really thin and pointy. And they kind of come in groups of 2 or 3. Or at least that's what I found looks the best, is when you group them like that. And I personally like, you see if you have some sort of like little holes like this, I think it looks just so much better. Because you're not necessarily trying to get something that is super realistic here. You do want to have, or get the feeling that it is a really nicely done piece of art. And I find that these holes within the leaves, that's the effect that they give, basically. Fantastic. We are going to add a bit of color variation within these leaves too. So back with the selection tool, still in freehand, you're going to draw another quick squiggle that you are going to feather quite a lot, so between 40 and 50%. And back with the hue, saturation, brightness, I'm going to lower your brightness. We're going to do this again with a different shape. Again, feather it quite a lot. And this time we're going to lift up the brightness. So we're also going to create some lighter zones and maybe lower the saturation a little bit. Otherwise it's going to look kind of a neon toxic color, which is not exactly what we want. And you can play with the hue a little bit if you see that you like it to be a bit more yellow, but that's totally optional. We are also going to lower the opacity so that we see the stalks behind the leaves, because you know bamboo leaves are not totally opaque. They do have some transparency to them. So go ahead and select your layer here. If you click on the N, it's going to open the blending modes as well as the opacity slider. So just go ahead and lower the opacity a little bit. So somewhere between 70 and 80% I find is the best for this project. And if you've watched any of my tutorials, you know what the next step is going to be, because it is my favorite step. It is the salt brush. So go ahead and click on your stock layer here and pick the salt brush. And starting from the outside, so from a blank section towards the color, just go ahead and it's going to add some really cool speckles. You don't want to draw them everywhere, otherwise it's going to look crazy. But you do want to have them both on the stalk as well as some of the leaves. We are also going to add some splatters, so create a brand new layer, and still with the same green, go ahead and pick the splatter brush and just drag it over. And this time we're also going to select a nice darker green that can be a bit more blue as well. And just add a little bit more splatters right there. And final thing we are going to do is we are going to change the blending mode of the splatter layer. So click on the N and put it to linear burn. What that does is the splatters that are above the stalk are just going to look darker and looks like they're blending with the real watercolor that would be underneath, which is a really cool final touch to add to the piece. So there we go, we have our final watercolor bamboo that we drew entirely in Procreate. If you do use this tutorial to draw your own, I would love to see the results, so please tag me either on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And if you have an idea of a tutorial you would like to see in Procreate, it could be a technique or a specific thing to draw, please comment below and I will try my best to film it really soon. And if you're interested in getting the same brushes that I've used today as well as the pre-textured watercolor file, I will link the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox in the description below, along with a promo code just for you guys. And otherwise, I will see you soon.